Hello, everyone. Welcome again to our podcast, Family Firm in Focus. I'm your host, Mohsin Adhi, and I am honored today to welcome our guest, respected Christian Stewart. Welcome, Christian. How are you?
Thank you very much, Mohsin, for having me. And it's an honor to be here to talk to you today. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation together.
Thank you. Thank you, Christian. Before we begin, although you're very popular, very familiar, so many people around the world, those who know you, those who have been into the family firm space, they know you as very recognized advisor. So I just want to briefly give some introduction, although it's very huge. I'm just going to point out a few of the things. Christian is a founder of Family Legacy Asia, which was founded way back in 2008. Christian is being awarded as a interdisciplinary award by Family Firm Institute in 2000, if I'm not wrong, 2021, interdisciplinary award. Yeah,
21, yes.
21.
Okay.
And he's being recognized as the leading advisor by Wealth Briefing Asia as well in 2017. Christian is also uh, co-teaching the module of family governance. And family governance module is being taught by himself, and it's a MS-based program in family office and family businesses. That's a
Yes.
part of Hong Kong University.
Oh, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology.
Hong Kong University of Science and Technology.
Yes.
Christian has been privileged to have clients most of the part of the Far East Asia, Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia, and a few others. He has also got exposure in some of the research-based tasks in USA as well. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Christian serves as a board of director with the great J. Hughes and for his foundation, J's Foundation, and he has been serving there for about, I think, since inception, or how many years, Christian?
For a couple of years, you've got me there. I'm not sure. So,
Oh,
not since inception, but maybe 3 or 4 years.
great. So, Christian, before any further delay, let's begin with some of the questions I was going through your profile as well. And the purpose behind this Family Firm in Focus is that since also part of Family Firm Institute, and we all advisors could join together, we learn from each other. So, from the perspective of Asia, we can see, and from people coming from West as well, the advisors, those who have got exposure to international cases, there are a few questions which I'm going to place, and we can start a conversation accordingly. Regarding the interdisciplinary uh, rules which we can see within the team of advisors, can you please shed some light on this interdisciplinary rule from the perspective of Asia? Which is different as compared to other part of the world because the cultural things are different. There are some different legacies aligned to this, and you are much more aware of that. And so what do you think about
Yes. Yeah. Um, so maybe there's two parts to answering that question. Maybe the first part is to tell you what I think is an ideal um, working arrangement as a consultant to a family. Then I have to maybe think about the what does this mean in practice? Is it easy to actually implement in practice? Um, so the first part is my concept of the ideal. Um, and so vast majority of my client base have been overseas Chinese families. I've had one engagement for 6 or 7 years with an Australian family, so a Western family. So that's really my counterpoint. Um,
it?
um, but to me, I come from a structuring background. I was originally a trust lawyer. Then I moved into governance, and it was only since about 2016, 17 that I've started to get exposure to learning and development through having clients that were working, had coaches that were working with them. But I think about family governance or governance for family business as, um, and this is often said, there's always a structural element to it, and there's a relational or culture element to it. And I've realized almost by accident, by being sort of forced by my clients to work with people who are good on the relationships, good on the culture, good on the coaching and development side, that, where your discipline of origin is something like law, you're never really going to be very good at the relationship piece of it. So it's almost quite obvious, but I think governance work, whether it's family business or family of wealth, it really requires an interdisciplinary team, and which is different from multidisciplinary. And it's obvious you need somebody who has that sort of structural vision for the family, someone who can help guide them, but as a consultant, not as an expert, towards whatever there's the next step they need to take on the governance side. But the governance doesn't work unless it's aligned with or supported by the culture. And so therefore you need a culture person. And it could just be as simple as a coach working together. So to me, that's the ideal basic team. And it is more of an interdisciplinary team. So let me also come back to that. However, you kind of need both to go together, because like the structural person or the governance person needs to have an appreciation of and support the work that's being done by the culture person. And I often say can often be a push and pull between those two sort of advisory approaches. And the culture person, so again, it could just be a coach that I'm talking about. They have to have experience or understand the context of, we're working with a family business, right? So there may be two things about that. One is, you don't want the coach, and you hear this story a couple of times, you don't want the coach to come in and tell the family member and say, well, it would be healthiest for you to individuate and just leave your family.
Mm.
That's kind of not the context. The context is trying to figure out how we get both together. And that culture person or that coaching person, they have to understand that there are different roles, and they have to understand the role context of the different individual family members. Anyway, so that's the basic team. But then in my approach, and this is sort of but then there's two extra, and they're off to the side. And so what I learned from Jay Hughes is it's really important to help grow the human, intellectual, social, spiritual capital of the family. And a big part of that is helping the individual family members to know themselves. And in practical terms, that means introducing different assessments to the individual family members. And so, for example, like the starting point for me, often it would be an Enneagram assessment. So if I'm working with a sibling group of like 3 or 4 siblings, I will often, so ideally it's myself and somebody who's better on the relational side as a pet team. And I'll introduce each of the siblings and maybe their spouses to another coach or expert who can do the Enneagram assessment, or do another really good assessment. It's called the Pro-D assessment, which is sort of very good at vocation. So there'll be people that I bring in to do assessments, and I'll just finish up on this piece. So again, the philosophy is like, how do we grow the human capital of the family? Well, you help the individual family members to know themselves, so increase in self-knowledge. So there's sort of a list of areas that you can explore with individuals. But then there's another side to the coin. So this is my perfect engagement, ideal engagement, if I have a magic wand. Um, the other side to the coin is that we all have things that hold us back. We all have limiting beliefs. We all have, and a lot of the things that hold us back are, we think about them, but often they're unconscious and often they're embodied. Um, so where I can, I will encourage. So if I'm working with a sibling group of like 3 or 4 different siblings, I will encourage them to go and also do their own sort of personal work with a somatic healer that I like to work with. Do it online, and they sort of do one-on-one calls with this somatic healer. And to me, that's like the perfect combination for how you can help um, grow human capital, basically, or kickstart that off. Yeah. So then if you sort of sit back and think about it, and this can lead into this idea of a chief learning officer, is I guess you say like the basic philosophy is that um, the growth of the human capital, so the individual development in a family business or family of wealth is important. The getting better at collaborating together as a team in a family business or family with wealth is important. So this development aspect is really important. So to me, you cannot separate um, um, learning and development from family governance. Like the two have to go together, because it's usually about how can we get the family to be more effective together as a family and at the ownership level. And to do that, therefore, again, you need this sort of team where you can balance structure and culture in the consulting. And you need to be able to source experts who can help family members with different issues. Like another quick obvious example might be where you're dealing with significant inherited financial capital, there could be like psychological issues around the money. So maybe you have to introduce like a therapist who specializes in money issues, or a consultant who can help with couples relationships. Yeah. So I think, yeah, so there's this idea that you are the consultant, but you also need to be a conductor and bring in different kinds of specialists. Sorry,
Great.
that's a lot. Yeah,
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 that's really
yeah,
a great point, especially when we talk as an advisor. You have highlighted there is an important need that, first of all, the family has to be aligned with the top tier of the main key person of an advisor, and then advisor has to get the team aligned where it is required. It could be with respect to the relationship therapy, it could be relationship wealth therapy, there could be, and especially considering from a background and from the country and areas where we are coming from, there is a requirement of women. My next question is also pertaining to the women as well. Uh, Women are getting more and more engaged now, and it's really very important that they feel more comfortable with the same gender of advisor at times, coming from, again, considering a fact from Muslim culture and the culture where especially I belong to, from Pakistan or such things. So women are getting involved now. They are getting education, they are getting into the business, they're getting more and more involved in family businesses as they are getting more awareness and idea for their rights, how to protect the rights, how to get into the business, be aware of what's going on, what's happening, what could be the inheritance law and all such things. So what's your takeaway with respect to this? Do you think I agree with this that yes, women are getting more involved and awareness is increasing?
yeah. There's a couple of points around this. Um, but maybe I will. So again, like most of my clients have been overseas ethnic Chinese. Um, I have to say that Like the most powerful person I've ever dealt with is a woman who sort of leads her sibling partnerships, leads the sibling partnership, and was always the natural leader within the family. Um, and there's something about if you have all male um, sibling partnerships, they can be pretty rowdy. Like, so it's almost like a strength for the family if you have a couple of daughters in the family. It's a strength because the sibling groups with females are better functioning. Um, um, but with the overseas Chinese families, they have a traditional inheritance rule, which so I've been in Hong Kong for 30 years, and I think I've seen it change over that time. And it's called the equal inheritance rule. And it was a principle that so the overseas Chinese families can be very hierarchical. So you have a patriarch, you can have a matriarch. In a sibling group, the siblings are usually very hierarchical as well, though there's a lot of variation around that. But the equal inheritance rule is that if you have four siblings and three are males, then traditionally it meant that all three males got an equal inheritance, equal ownership of the shares in the family business. And traditionally the daughters didn't. And then I think over my time, you've seen the daughters starting to get part shares was kind of the first step in the family business, maybe half the share that each of the sons get. Whereas today, I think it's very much a case of equal ownership. So today I see daughters in the overseas Chinese families having equal ownership rights to the sons. Um, I guess the way I'm thinking about it is, but you still might see the daughters being assigned the sons are in the business or operations, and the son and the daughters are running the family office or running the family foundation, so an assigned task. I think yes. So definitely women have the right to be at the table with the overseas Chinese families today. So think about the four-room model as a family business consultant. So any family business, we have a family room, we have an owner room, we have a board room, we have management. And the thing about that model is to say that, well, actually, all four of these rooms are important. And we have to look at the functioning or effectiveness of all four of these rooms. And the model tells you that, you know, succession for a family business is about it's not just about the management succession, which is the way the older generation tends to think. So how can we get the right people? There's multiple opportunities to participate in the succession. So the female family members, of course they'll have a role in the family room. As I said, maybe family office, family foundation is a common scenario. But the key room that is underdeveloped with the ethnic Chinese families, overseas Chinese families, is the ownership room. And so it might be that you can have one or two of the sons in management roles. And in a lot of families to start with, if they haven't looked at their family governance or family business governance, they don't think about the ownership role. And they don't think about accountability to the owners. And the ownership is actually more important for the business continuity than the management role. So to me, it's maybe that's a key thing to me as a consultant is let's build up the ownership room and let's work out what are the decisions that have to be approved by the ownership room or made by the ownership room. And so even if the daughters are not in the management role, today with the equal inheritance rule, they're in the ownership room. Um, and so that's where the family have to learn to have this accountability and equal voice to daughters as part of that ownership room. Yeah. I have another client family where um, if you look at the third generation, it's the daughters who are all it's the daughters, the girls, cousins, female cousins, who are the smart ones in that family. So yeah, so it's definitely changed for the time I've been in Hong Kong. Yeah.
What happens if there are no son and only, let's say, a person is having only daughters? Then how usually the Chinese family do the inheritance in that case?
Um, there are examples in Hong Kong. I haven't. So as I started with, I've seen this one family where, the most powerful figure is the daughter. There are Hong Kong families, I haven't worked with them, where it is only daughters. Um, then they inherit. They operate it, they run it. If there are no sons, that's it. There is a very famous old Hong Kong shipping family, um, which is going back before my time, where the patriarch was quite famous for having four daughters. In that particular case, I think he split the sort of the empire into four different. If anybody's listening to this and they're from Hong Kong, they'll know what family I'm talking about. Um, he split the empire into four shares, divided it, one for each of the four family branches. But effectively, the sons-in-law then took over the management role in that particular case. Yeah. So that's an old Hong Kong example. Yeah.
So,
So lots of variety.
yeah, lots of variety. And in fact, this leads to uh, another debate, but that's not part of this. But there are certain constraints where people think that there should not be any in-laws involving in this. There are some families, those who set the no in-laws policies as well.
Yes, yes. I think this is so when I talk to my like friends, colleagues in the US, um, in-laws definitely have you know a full seat at the table, definitely in the family governance. When I look at this Australian family, so Western family that I had worked for, um, it was still a bit mixed. There were some governance activities which were only for the male sons, and but generally a lot of participation by the um, predominantly female in-laws in that case in other governance forums. Um, but I noticed sort of, so with the clients that I work with, if they're ethnic Chinese families, then um, if you say who should come to the family meeting, a family council or an owner's council, no, they don't include the in-laws. It's more normal that they will not include in-laws in the family governance, except to say, maybe once a year we're going to have once or twice a year we'll have a family assembly meeting. But the family assembly will largely be for social purposes. It won't have any real teeth or voting. Yeah. So I do try as a consultant to figure out ways to get the in-laws included in a family meeting, for example. So I worked for like 6 years with one family where there are three siblings, all sons, all working in executive roles, and um, we would typically see them for a 2-day family meeting to work on part of their family constitutions or family policies or communication. And lunch on the second day. So we would often have dinner with the whole family, the first night or the second night. Lunch on the second day, we always brought in their spouses, and later on would spend the second day afternoon doing some kind of like mini workshop on a topic that was sort of good and fun for their relationships, which included the sons and their wives, and then bring in the parents at the very end of the day for a wrap up. So it was a safe way to let them know we're having family meetings, to include them in some kind of activity part of the family meetings, and eventually to give them a high level briefing of what had been agreed on in the family meetings. But they weren't given a full seat at the table for the whole duration of the meetings. Yeah.
Great. And Christian, your specialty is facilitate communication among the family members. And while structuring the whole governance structure, uh, it plays very important role when you are dealing with them. You're setting up the meeting, you're setting up the family council as well. How crucial it is, especially for the families, those who are listening, how crucial it is to set up this important role of communication among the family members and among the advisors and the families, those who are members as well.
Yes. Maybe I'm thinking there's three sort of parts or points to this. But the first point, and this was an old rule of thumb or principle I was taught or heard from a family business consultant many, many years back, which was that um, so in certain parts of Asia, there was a lot of interest in the family constitution. And I remember listening to this very experienced advisor at the time saying, um, if you can't listen to each other with empathy, you can't have a family constitution. Um, and I think that's a really good principle. Um, so to me, the whole purpose of family meetings is to have a place where the family can have better communication than normal. Right, as the starting point. So if you are starting like a governance assignment with a family, like I think the first step is to think about how can we make communication in the family explicit? Um, so getting the family to members to do a survey that sort of rates how effective they are at communicating is probably a very good starting point when you're in an assessment process or phase with working with a family. Um, and that could be pen and paper, or it could be online. Um, there's this thing called the circumplex model, which has an aspect of family communication and family flexibility. Um, so making that topic of communication explicit is important. Um, if you are working with a family, then you're likely to have them help put in place family meeting rules. Asking them to reflect on what does good communication mean, and um, discuss that based on their own experience and codify it. But then I guess there's the question of, okay, when you're a consultant or facilitator working with a family, facilitating a family meeting, like using that as a forum for improving communication is good. But then the next question is, okay, what about when you're not around anymore? What does the family do when they don't have a facilitator present? Yeah. So when the facilitator is present, I can answer that because that's easier. Um, One thing is, like I like to do my family meetings, like using the philosophy or the structure of a lady called Nancy Kline, Kline. And she wrote, her first book is called Time to Think. She wrote another book called More Time to Think. And I think she has another one after that. And she's well known for this idea of the thinking environment and thinking pairs and partnerships. And so she recommends practices like starting meetings with a sort of a round where everybody just has a chance to become present and download what's on their mind, and finishing meetings with a round of gratitude and some gratefulness for what's happened in the meeting. So I like to bring in her principles of thinking rules. I like to um, set up things like have a row of chairs in a line so they're not facing each other, put everybody in the chairs, and one person can speak at a time without interruption from the others. And so when you're dealing with a hierarchical family, like I've had cases where like the youngest son has said to me, wow, this is the only time I can speak. All right. But then you're sort of really forcing a very strict one person at a time rule. Um, and they're not looking at each other when they talk, which reduces the reactivity. And then the other thing I would say is that I think it's really important to have a feedback ritual or process in family meetings. So use that as an opportunity, especially if they're working together, use that as an opportunity to give each other feedback. Um, and so that's also using a structured, safe process for giving feedback. Um, then what do you do when the consultant's not in the room anymore? Oh, I think you try to introduce some tools and skill sets to them. And just quickly, one would be teaching them about the difficult conversations framework and worksheets from the Harvard negotiation project. So Doug Stone, Sheila Heen, um, teaching them about like listening to feedback, receiving, taking on board feedback, at least being open to it. And I'm a big fan of different worksheets. So um, like a really, really simple worksheet is called the Active Insight worksheet by a guy called Andrew Bernstein. I love show and tell. So I've got this book is really about just how to use this Active Insight worksheet. And the worksheet is literally 2 pages, a front and a back on a single piece of paper. And this is this is the difficult conversations one. And this is the Nancy Klein Time to Think. So these books are like my touchstones. Just briefly on the Active Insight one, it's to say, we all get caught up in a story. And when we're under anxiety or stress or angry with someone, like we get tunnel vision. So we can't see anything except for our own story. So the Active Insight worksheet forces you to challenge your own story and get a little bit of distance from your own story. So it's not to say that your assessment of something is incorrect, but it's to help you get a little bit of distance so that maybe you can see other options, other explanations, or think about other solutions. So it's empowering family members with those kind of simple tools and practices so that they can take away and do it themselves.
Great, wonderful. Show and tell is really helpful. And as you mentioned, worksheets, like definitely as an advisor, we know how important it is to have worksheet, which can be used as a tool. We also are aware that once we are there, we can play a role as a facilitator. But once there's a time, definitely the assignment is going to finish up by the end. They are going to be on their own. So there must be some practice of the tool which they are used to it, and they can just facilitate through those kind of a worksheet. And by the
Yes.
way, uh, I would like to mention here for the listeners as well that since you are also serving with few of the families as a chief learning officer, so as you have mentioned, like this kind of teachings are there for the families. Before moving on and going into the governance structuring phase, it's very important to get them aware, learn how things are, and you have better show that as well. Any comment on that as a chief learning officer? How do you facilitate family with respect to this kind of learning before they move on for the structured governance space?
Yes. So the chief learning officer is a new role that you're starting to see in probably more so in the single family offices and multifamily offices in the US. So it's a new emerging role. And again, it comes back to this idea from Jay Hughes that it's really important to, if you're a family with significant, a successful family or a family with significant financial capital, you should be putting money into supporting your human, intellectual, social, spiritual capital as a family. But there's probably 3 elements to the role, right? So the first element is all the kinds of things we've just been talking about and all the kinds of things that a family business consultant would naturally do, which is when you have a group of family members, whether it's in a family meeting and communication's important, or it's in an ownership group, or it's on a corporate board, um, this group has to make the question of like, how effective are we, like a conscious question, and reflect on it and think about how effective are our decisions, how effective are we as a group, um, what's the next step to get better. So part of the role of a chief learning officer overlaps heavily with a just a facilitator or an org development role, is to say, how can we help the collective, the group, get more effective? Then the second part is, and I've kind of already touched on this as well, is like, you need to help the individual family members to know themselves, to grow in maturity, to individuate, to do all those assessments, to go and get help if they've got any roadblocks in their life. And so there's that human adult development, leadership development aspect, which the chief learning officer can drive. And that could all be in service of making those individuals better participants in the family governance or in the family business, or as a future leader of the family business. Then the third part of it is helping individual family members, everybody in the family, become, responsible owners, responsible beneficiaries, integrate financial capital into their own lives, but be successful in their own lives away from the family. So you have to balance always together and apart. How can the family support individuals be effective away from the family? And so that's another area where a chief learning officer can help members of the rising generation, like prepare for job interviews or give them a financial education, teach them how to budget, etc. So there's sort of those three domains to support. But this is the thing. So the chief learning officer doesn't have to be a complicated concept, right? It could be as simple as saying, look, it's important that we think as a family about developing in these three areas. We should have a subcommittee. We should have one or two family members, or a family member and one of the advisors, thinking about this area and what can be done and what needs to be done in those three areas. Or just hire a coach or a counselor who can come and just be available and work with the family, collectively, individually, together and apart, for a couple of days a week or a couple of days a month. Like, it's a really simple thing to put into practice. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Wonderful, Christian. We are getting close to our conversation, and it's really inspirational for even myself. It's a great learning where a person like yourself, having experience dealing with mm, multiple different families, and sitting here in Asia, when we talk about dealing with Asian family, there are different cultural aspects as well. So we have to consider that. And uh, to sum up what you have told, there are so many different aspects which are engaged when we are going through the process of family consultation. One of the key aspects is how familiar you are with the background, with the culture from the families whom you are dealing with. So you started with that, and then once you know the family, then you start getting into them. There are different stages before asking them to jump in directly into the governance part of the structure. Right. So is there something which you like to say in order to conclude or sum up what you have uh, demonstrated and told the other families?
Yes. Because I've been doing show and tell. I don't have a copy of it handy, but on this culture aspect, a really simple and good book is Jim Grubman and Dennis Jaffe's book, Cross Cultures. And if you look in that book, it will have a table which sort of is very granular on the different elements of culture. And so you can use that as a tool to have a conversation within a family about, are there cultural differences between the rising gen and the older gen? Um, every country within Asia has a different culture in a way. And I guess the thing I've learned is that um, you have to be careful not to make assumptions about the culture of a particular family. Um, maybe just the last thought is um, so generalizing, so contradicting myself. A lot of the overseas Chinese families are very closed systems and traditionally very self-reliant systems. So the classic example of that is this, if you say, look, we should have some independent directors, or we should start with some independent people on an advisory board. I've had people say, no, look, we're Asian families. We don't do that. We're not going to bring in an outsider to help with the governance of our corporate governance of our business. But what I've learned over time is that some families may say no, other Asian families will say yes. So there's no, just because one family says no today, doesn't mean that another family won't be open to that idea. And and just because the family said no today doesn't mean that they won't change their mind or be willing to try it out a couple of years later.
Mhm. Great, wonderful. It was pleasure talking to you, getting into this conversation, and it's always pleasure whenever we have conversation. Although we are part of Asian Circle, and you are heading that virtual study group as well. So I'm always learning from seniors like yourself. Again, thanks for your time, Christian. I really appreciate. I know how busy you are, consulting work and going through so many uh, structures and families and developing so many things for their families. Again, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
No, I'm deeply honored to be interviewed by you, Mohsin, and I'm very deeply grateful for the contribution that you make to the Asian Circle, and I really love your book too, The Right Before We Fight. So
Thank
thank
you.
you again for having me.
Take care.
Okay,
That's it. Bye for now.
goodbye.